We're starting to hear terms like the poorest of the poor. That's those people who live at 50% or below the official poverty level. Nearly 7%, or 20.5 million Americans, are actually in that situation today. So how has the United States reached this point? And what will it take to turn things around? So when will today's president declare war on poverty? And not just declare it, but send in reinforcements? And when will the American people join him? To help me answer all those questions and more, I'm joined by Michael Snyder, the founder of the economiccollapseblog.com. He joins us from Washington State. Hey there, Michael. Let's begin with this. The US Census data is out. How has President Obama responded to this new information about poverty?
Well, the Obama administration seems to think that if the stock market is surging, that everything is okay. But the truth is that the poorest of the poor, they keep increasing. While Barack Obama is saying the economy is improving, as you noted, there are now 6.7% of all Americans are living in extreme poverty. That is the highest level ever recorded. And then you just look at the regular poverty numbers. Last year, 2.6 million more Americans slipped under the poverty line. That was the most Americans to fall into poverty ever. And then if you look back, and this is part of a long-term trend, back in the year 2000, we had 1 out of every 9 Americans living in poverty. Today, we have 1 out of every 7 Americans living in poverty.
And Michael, I know you wrote about this recently, including a part that you wrote, 19 facts about poverty that will absolutely astound you. And I wanted to put up just a few of those. These are some statistics from last year. According to US Census data, the percentage of very poor went up in 300 out of 360 of the largest metropolitan areas. And the poverty rate of children increased by 22%, with 1 of 4 children on food stamps. Also, you wrote that the number of Americans on food stamps in general has increased 74% since 2007. Also, something that important, we talk about children, we also should talk about the elderly. 1 out of 6 elderly Americans now lives below the federal poverty line. I'm wondering, do you think the majority of Americans understand how dire this situation is?
I think we're so isolated today. We all have our own jobs. We all get in our cars and live our own little lives and drive to the office. And sometimes we don't realize how many people out there are really suffering. But when you take a look at the bigger picture, people really are hurting. When you've got 22% of all children in the United States living in poverty, that's twice the level that we see in countries like France or the UK. So that's very disturbing. Or you've got the number of Americans on food stamps. It increases every single month. Every single month almost we set a brand new record. Today it's almost 46 million Americans that are on food stamps. And as you noted, that's increased by 74% since back in 2007. So poverty is exploding, but Americans have become so insulated. They might live in a wealthy community. They might live where they're not exposed to this. But it's expanding. All the numbers show it.
I want to talk about the report that we just showed. So the poverty line in America is set at $10,890 for a single person and $22,350 for a family of 4. Do you think that those numbers are set a little too low? That seems to be what a lot of people that Kaylin spoke to for this report. They said, you know, we make more than that, but we still can't survive.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. And you can see this across the nation. For example, the number of Americans going to food banks and places where they can get food has increased by more than 40% since this most recent economic downturn. So it's true, we've got this whole class of Americans today that are the working poor. They go, they work their part-time jobs, they flip burgers, they work at Walmart, but it's not enough to feed a family. But they may make enough where they don't only the case. But even if you look at the numbers that the government does give us, it clearly shows that poverty is definitely on the rise. I mean, when you've got 1 out of every 6 elderly Americans that living in poverty, a lot of them get Social Security and things like that, but they still can't make it. In this winter, many elderly Americans are going to have to choose between heating their homes, putting food on the table, or getting their medicine. Those are real tough choices to make.
I think that's a really important point. We always talk here at RT about, that 9% unemployment number that we keep seeing, how that's much lower than it actually should be. But the fact is, a lot of these numbers that we're seeing, the bottom line is it's showing a trend. And that trend is that a whole lot more people are struggling, and they're struggling in even more dire ways than they were before. I'm wondering what you think, Michael. I mean, what's the point of even having poverty levels?
Well, we definitely want to identify and help those that are in need. And we definitely want to give them assistance and food stamps and so on. But those are only temporary solutions. What they really need are jobs. But the jobs are leaving this country by the millions. Big corporations are shipping our jobs out to areas where they pay, areas of the world where they pay much fewer wages. And the good manufacturing jobs are being replaced by service jobs, which pay a lot less. And people are having a hard time supporting their families on these jobs while the price of food keeps rising, the price of putting gasoline in your car keeps rising. So American families are feeling more squeezed than ever. The median income has decreased the last couple of years while we've seen inflation rise, especially on essentials. So people are feeling more squeezed than ever, and a lot more American families are being pushed into poverty by no fault of their own.
Certainly some really interesting points raised about the problems. A lot of the leaders in our country are starting to identify the very same problems. What we still seem to be missing is some solutions. A really good point about those jobs going overseas. Seems like perhaps the next year, the 2012 campaign will bring up some new ideas that haven't been thought of. But right now, that's something that definitely needs to happen. Founder of the economiccollapseblog.com, that's Michael T. Snyder.